Vine sat before the mirror as she applied her lipstick that went along with her beautiful green dress. She was satisfied with her evening look. A little bit of mascara, wavy hair, and blush that adorned her cheeks. She was done. The click of the door closing echoed through the silence as Jungkook approached her. She didn't realize when he came back home, but now that he was in the same air as her, she felt her body automatically heating up, like it did always in his presence. Jungkook's gaze, intense and possessive, fixated on Vine's reflection. Jungkook, you look stunning, as always, he murmured, his voice a velvety whisper that sent shivers down her spine. Vine met his eyes through the mirror as he walked up to her with calculated steps and stood behind her. He picked up the necklace from the open box placed on the dressing, which Vine probably chose to wear tonight. He hooked it around her neck. It was a decent, small pendant, but it shone the brightest, costing much more than any diamond. Vine stood up and turned to face him, her eyes meeting his dark, penetrating gaze, an abyss of darkness. Yet, if she looked in them, all she saw was love burning for her. He closed the distance between them, his fingers tracing the curve of her jaw. Jungkook, tonight, everyone will see what's mine. His words laced with possessiveness. His touch was electric, sending a surge of heat through her veins. She tilted her head up, meeting his lips in a slow, lingering kiss. Their connection was magnetic, a dance of desire and danger. Wine, and what if I want the world to know? She teased, her voice a sultry invitation. Jungkook chuckled, the sound a blend of dark amusement and raw hunger. Jungkook, they can look, but they can never touch. You're mine, darling. His fingers trailed down her spine. She shivered. The touch burned into her skin. He knew exactly what his touch did to her, and he took complete advantage of that. As Wine prepared for the evening event, wearing her heels, Jungkook observed her every move. Jungkook, you handle elegance with a touch of rebellion. His fingers grazed the delicate fabric of her dress. Jungkook, just like you handle me. She turned, a playful glint in her eyes. Wine, you enjoy being handled, don't you? Jungkook's gaze intensified and he pulled her closer. Jungkook, only by you, he confessed, his lips finding hers once more. The room seemed to disappear as they lost themselves in the darkness of their own world. Later, at the event, Jungkook's eyes never left Wine, his arm possessively wrapped around her waist. They navigated the crowd. The grand entrance of the event hall was adorned with dimly lit chandeliers, casting an ethereal glow on the elegantly dressed attendees. As they walked through the crowd, Vine felt the weight of gazes upon her. triggering the familiar anxiety. She couldn't handle the sight of much people, and Jungkook knew it so well. Jungkook sensed her unease and tightened his grip on her waist. Jungkook, remember, you're with me. No one here matters. He introduced her to few people. He led her into conversations, making sure she felt involved. He kept his arm around her throughout the whole event, introduced her in a way no one dared to eye her wrongly. In the midst of the elegant event, Vine excused herself from Jungkook's side to explore a display of artwork. She loved how they provided her with peace. As she was lost in the beauty of them, suddenly a sharp, piercing voice cut through the air. Vine froze, her heart racing as the harp whirl assaulted her ears. She turned, and right 2 feet away from her, she didn't understand what was going on. But there stood a woman and an angry man. Vine had a problem. She couldn't handle people talking in a loud voice, let alone angry. It brings her to a panic attack. Every time someone talks in a rude, loud tone, it grips her in a chokehold. Suddenly, the woman turned towards her and pointed at the innocent Vine, who was still trying to comprehend what the hell was going on. I stumbled because of her. She moved her foot in my leg. The woman said, pointed a finger at her. Then she turned towards the man and held his arm, her eyes turning in a plead. Darling, you know I'm extra caring in your case. Would never let this wine slip on you. Vine's eyes moved towards the angry man and saw his blue colored suit now painted red. The man stepped forward. The only step filled in rage was enough to put her in a chokehold. Usually, Vine was a bold and confident person, but this one condition always made her upset on herself for not being able to stand for herself. If you're not going to use your eyes, how about I remove them for you? He yelled. He tightened his grip around the glass he held as it broke into pieces in his hand, drawing blood out of his skin. He was mad, truly mad. He brought the broken piece near her eye. At this point, Vine was shaking. It all happened so fast. A few breaths, and there she stood at the receiving edge of an angry man, glaring at her with those eyes, and a glass held against her eye. The next breath, he was out of her sight. She didn't see, didn't turn, but she knew it was her husband who came forward to help. She stayed frozen in her spot. Jungkook slammed the man against the wall, his back covering the scene in case Vine looked, his voice as low as it could be, yet it spat venom, a warning that could send the other to his grave. Jungkook, keep your voice low. The other man had his eyes wide open, being confronted by the John Jungkook himself. Jungkook, and hands to yourself before you see them adorned in an art piece similar to the one behind you. Everything happened either too quickly or too slowly. Vine was unable to understand. Even his back radiated such evil energy that held the whole place under a spell. Another breath, and Jungkook was already taking a step away from the man. It was hard, but he closed his eyes, turned his expressions normal, his face calm, his voice soothing, and his body soft as he turned towards his wife. With the most gentle touch and voice of an angel, he held her arms. The panic attack gripped her, and she clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. The polished world around her blurred, and the edges of her vision darkened. He picked her up in his arms and walked away towards a more quieter corner, away from prying eyes. Jungkook, look at me, princess. I want you to breathe and only focus on me. He guided her through deep, focused breathing. He forced her to keep his eyes on her, to only see him. Jungkook, you're my word wine. No one gets to tarnish that, he whispered as he brushed his fingers against her cheeks. He wished he could go back and do things very evil to the man who dared to even eye her angrily. No one dared to do that. Yet, he couldn't. He couldn't do it back then, in front of her eyes. He couldn't do it now either. He wrapped his arm around her waist so her body was pressed against his. The warmth of his body spread through her. The familiar feeling of protection seeped through her, and she could feel her breathing slowly getting normal. The black in her eyes slowly disappeared to reveal the most magnificent eyes she fell in love with. He held her close to him, kissed her temple and her head several times before he locked his hand in her hair. Jungkook, no one will hurt you, princess. This is John's promise to you. She held his shirt and rested her head against his chest. His heartbeat provided her with peace. The warmth calmed her body, and his touch and presence healed her soul. She felt complete. Nothing could be more beautiful than this. Fine. Keep your promise, Jungkook. Jungkook, I will, even over my dead body.